Delighted to be joined right now by Bruce Feldman, CBSSports.com. Good evening to you, Bruce. Thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Good to be on with you guys.
Did you have a good time here in Morgantown?
I did. Always have a good time in Morgantown.
It's
not the easiest place for me to get to, but yeah, it was a fun day. I mean, it's kind of an interesting comparison because the last time I was there for a game was a night game, and it was LSU, and it was pretty wild. And this one was early. It was obviously noon in the first big 12 game. But it was a cool atmosphere, and obviously, I talked to some of my buddies who also cover college football nationally, and, everyone had talked about what a bad week of games it was, and to be out there for that game and to see what, that offense and Geno Smith did, it's a game that if you were there, I don't think you'll forget anytime soon.
You are very tight with Dana and members of the WVU staff, so you've seen these guys in a lot of different situations, even pre-West Virginia. What is your take? Put it into perspective what this offense was able to do on Saturday in comparison to what you've been able to see them when you saw them, at Texas Tech, at Oklahoma State.
Well, I think the biggest difference, look, Geno was already here when these guys came into the program, and I think if you put Geno, I live in Los Angeles, if Geno Smith played for USC, Geno Smith would be a star in that offense. I think he's just very talented. He's very sharp, and he picks up stuff, and he's obviously extremely committed to the film study and all the other things that go into being an elite quarterback. The other thing that they have is, and they do have really good receivers, and I think the thing that kind of gets lost in the shuffle of Tavon Austin and now Stedman Bailey kind of blowing up nationally is there's a pretty good offensive line. You have, a tough center. You have some guys who played a lot around him, and I think that helps. But, there's been some adjustments. Obviously, Leach, what he did or what he likes to do and still does, Dana's tweaked his system and does some things differently and likes to run things a little differently. In a lot of ways, some of the things, how they run a program in terms of how they speak, how they address the team, personalities are probably more similar than they're different. But just in terms of the way this system has kind of evolved has been interesting to see what they've done with it. And there's guys who came from the Leach system. Shannon Dawson ever worked for Leach, but I think he'd been around this system. Jake Spavital, the quarterback, kind of really is a true Dana protege, having worked with him at Houston and Oklahoma State. So I think you have a lot of guys now with a pretty good sense of, hey, this is what we want to accomplish. And then when you take and see what Geno can do, and I wrote about this yesterday, one of the things one of the guys on the staff brought up after they watched the film Saturday afternoon was he hit a touchdown pass on a play that wasn't even in the game plan this week. It was something he checked to, he saw something he liked and figured he can exploit. And when you have a quarterback who has that kind of timing and that kind of confidence and sense of what he's doing out there, the offense is going to take off. Now, is it going to take off to the level it is now? Probably not. But you got a guy who's definitely on top of his game and in a system that seems to fit him.
Bruce Feldman from CBSSports.com joins us. He was at the Mountaineer game against Baylor on Saturday. Bigger picture stuff here, Bruce. We're starting to see big numbers. We see Georgia and Tennessee. We see Oklahoma State and Texas. We're seeing what Oregon is doing on a weekly basis. Big picture stuff. Where do you think this game is right now, college football as a whole, offensively?
Well, I think you see a lot of guys who use space, whether it's vertical or horizontal, and to spread things around in the passing game. If you have a real, the common thread on almost all those teams, whether it was Geno Smith or Tyler Bray or in Georgia's case, they have two big-time backs, and
right.
But they do. Aaron Murray's played a lot of football, and I think now that you've seen a little development in the Texas quarterback, in David Ash, and I think you see guys in a system that, I think that part of it is, especially when it comes to some of these Texas-bred quarterbacks and receivers, because of that 7-on-7 style that had really, kind of sprouted through the high school programs there, and in the summer, you have a lot of guys who really understand the passing game and understand how to play in space, and I think that with that as a base, I'm not saying that they can't be stopped, because if you can get a lot of pressure, you can still cause people some problems. But I just think that so much of that now is gone in that direction. I mean, look, the game I was at when West Virginia played LSU a year and a half ago or a year ago, Gino threw for 450 yards, and he wasn't even on that night.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was a little off. If he was on, West Virginia probably wins that game. He probably throws for 600 in that one against, you can't knock LSU's defense, and he lit it up in the second half, and Tavon Austin did. So I think that kind of tells you, if you have, a very good quarterback with some dynamic receivers in a good system, they're going to give anybody, whether it's Alabama or LSU or whoever, a lot of problems. We see Oregon with their unique system doing it, and I think, a couple of years ago, and I'm sure this name isn't going to make a lot of people smile, but I remember talking to Rich Rodriguez when he was at Michigan when he first got there, and he said the toughest thing to do on a football field is tackle a guy in space one-on-one. And when you have that kind of thing, and when you can get great athletes or really good athletes out there, it just puts people back on their heels all the time. And I think that's what you saw Saturday. I think you saw it from Baylor too, because after a while, it looked like the West Virginia secondary was shell shocked, and you had guys who's, if you don't have any confidence on the defensive side, those problems are going to get compounded really fast.
Yeah, absolutely. Bruce Feldman, CBSSports.com, is our guest.
Bruce, your thoughts on where West Virginia stacks up nationally? Obviously, some holes to fill defensively, but they're still right there with their top 10 ranking. How do they compare with some of the other teams you've seen?
Well, I didn't see him with Sean Austin in there, and we'll see when he gets healthy. I mean, a big physical back to add to that, I think, is only going to make the offense that much more dangerous. I mean, to me, right now, this is the most explosive offense in college football. I mean, I've seen Oregon in person, and you have Oregon has obviously a great running game, and they have some talented young quarterback, but he's a young quarterback, and I think Marcus Mariota is going to be a great college quarterback. But I think right now Geno Smith already is, and I think because of that, I think you have, even with West Virginia's big question marks on defense, and I think they're really in the secondary. You have a couple of young safeties, and you have cornerbacks right now that just don't look like they have much confidence. And I think that if those guys don't, they're going to be challenged a lot. And there's a lot of teams. I don't think right now Ash is at the level of Geno Smith, but he's playing very well. He's not turning the ball over. He's a much improved quarterback. And Texas, as everybody knows, has some great athletes. So it's going to be interesting to see how they match up. I don't expect Geno to throw for over 600 yards this week. I just think that Texas has much better athletes than Baylor. I think they're with all due respect to Art Browstaff, but I think Texas's defense is a better coach group. I think they probably have some pressure problems that West Virginia is going to have to address, because they can get pressure without blitzing, because I think their defensive ends are so good. And I'm curious to see how West Virginia does on the road. I'm not looking for their defense to shut down Ash, but I'm curious to see just how close to what I saw on Saturday this West Virginia offense can do on the road against a more talented team than what they saw against Baylor.
Bruce, it's a little ridiculous to ask about Heisman Trophy chances as we enter the first day of October, but talk a little bit about that. Are you in agreement that as we sit today, Geno is probably the clear front runner, part one? Part two, is this a normal formula, or do you think he's peaked early and that's tough to win it when you're hitting your stride here in the 1st of October?
A colleague of mine, Chris Houston, who does this Heisman pundit blog, he had made a good point about a lot of guys who came out in the first month of the season hot as a front runner, and very few of them, stayed in the top two at the end. Now, Robert Griffin III had a huge September last year and dipped a bit and then came back. Now, I think West Virginia has a better team than Baylor did last year. I don't think, a lot of times with some of these guys, they need, as soon as they have a bad game, people go, oh, see, the competition went back, and here's what, he was just doing it against cupcakes or whatever. I don't think Geno needs to have 60 touchdowns and 0 picks or else. I think, if he can sustain a level somewhere between, what he did against even Maryland, he doesn't have to put up ridiculous numbers every week. People now know who he is. They want to tune in to see what West Virginia does. If they go 10-2, I think Gino's gonna probably win the Heisman, because I don't see anybody. The only one out there right now to me that is even when I had to fill out a top 3 in part of a survey I take there. I mean, I could have put Gino after Saturday. I put in Colin Klein because he's another one who's been just a real outstanding, cog to a really good team that's surprised people, that's won on the road, that's produced. But I don't see, Matt Barkley lost and didn't play well on the road under pressure. He didn't particularly play well the following week, and he's a guy with 2 great receivers. I think there's not a lot of guys right now that are even close to Geno Smith. That doesn't mean he can't stumble or something can't happen. There's no locks, but I think he is right now very far out in front. But again, like you said, it's October 1st. It doesn't mean anything. And, if you'd ask Geno Smith, it probably doesn't mean anything even if it's December 1st.
Absolutely.
But for fans and for us in the media, I mean, right now, he is so far out in front of the pack. But, if they lose 2 of their next 3 games, that'll change. And we in the media, we're creatures of the moment. We'll fall in love with somebody else next Saturday.
Yep. Bruce Feldman, CBSSports.com. Our guest, one last question for you. A lot of good games this weekend. Where are you heading?
I'm actually going back to New York. I'm in the studio this week for CBS Sports Network, and I go back. I'll be in there Thursday night and all day Saturday. So, it's good because you get to watch all the games. Right. And honestly, last week or Saturday, there was no other place that really mattered like it did seeing what West Virginia was doing. So, I'm curious. There's a bunch of good games, and there's more matchups, and you never know. I mean, I feel like there'll be something else that'll leave us talking, 48 hours later.
Yep, that's the beauty of the whole deal. Hey, Bruce, thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate it. We'll see you down the road.
My pleasure. All
Take
right,
care.
thanks, guys.
You bet. Bye-bye. Bruce Feldman, CBSSports.com. Check him out.